This podcast is based on the German podcast Föhr nach New York, Eine Auswanderergeschichte. Föhr to New York, an immigration story. By Honig&Gold, NDR Schleswig-Holstein, and the Ferring Foundation of Föhr from the year 2024.
Hey there. Before we start, this is episode 5 of Föhr to New York, an emigrant's story. If you haven't heard the first ones yet, it's best to start with them. One more thing. This episode contains descriptions of war events and Hermann's conscription into the Second World War. The content may be disturbing, especially for people who have had traumatic experiences related to war and violence. Please be mindful if this applies to you.
From that day forward, I was very nervous and had a bad feeling about what lay in store for me. Eventually, my unlucky day did come.
These lines are taken from a letter written by my grandfather, Hermann. As far as I know, it is the only document in which he writes in detail about his war experience. Hey there, I'm Bente Faust. This podcast is about the story of my grandparents, Inge and Hermann. They emigrated from Föhr to New York. Inge told me everything and I recorded it. I called her Urmam, which is the Frisian word for grandma, but you already know that. In the last episode, Inge comes back to New York to help her father in the deli. But they end up closing the store. Times are hard for a small business. Rivert, Inge's father, goes back to Föhr. When World War II breaks out in 1939, Hermann and Urmam are in New York. They have fallen in love. She is 16 and he is 19 years old. But things are about to get uncomfortable for Germans in the US, including the Frisians.
Föhr to New York, an immigration story. A podcast by Honig&Gold and the Ferring Foundation of Föhr. This is the 5th episode, A War and a Wedding. On September 3rd, 1939, 2 days after the invasion of Poland by German troops, France and England declare war on the German Reich. A short time later, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India, and the Union of South Africa also declare war. The United States remains neutral. These days, many letters are being sent back and forth between Föhr and New York. Everyone is worried. The Second World War has begun, and Inge and Hermann are in New York, their parents on the island. The future is uncertain on both sides of the Atlantic. In a letter dated December 6, 1939, Father Rivert, who is now living on Föhr again, tries to encourage his daughter.
My dear daughter Inge, the war is preventing you from being with us on Föhr right now. This is the first Christmas that you will have to spend alone, far from home. I hope you don't feel abandoned. We will certainly be thinking of you a lot that evening and imagining your movements, not following your actions that day, in our thoughts. You are brave and will overcome any lonely feelings. I imagine you won't have much time to think in New York on Christmas Eve because there will be plenty of work to do. You've been with Grete for so long now that you're practically part of the family. I wish you a very happy holiday together. Yours truly, your father.
What her father doesn't know is that Inge really wants to stay in New York. But now, on Christmas Eve, she doesn't feel comfortable at her cousin's house. Hermann celebrates Christmas with his brothers and their families. Inge would much rather be with her family on Föhr, or with Hermann. But she has obligations. This difficult and lonely Christmas still saddens her 70 years later.
The first Christmas, I had to work until 10 o'clock in the evening. Imagine Christmas Eve. Then the man came down and said, now you can go upstairs. Then she gave me a present wrapped in brown paper, underwear for old women. So that was terrible. I was awfully homesick. I still had a package from my mother, and I locked my room to sit and open it. I unpacked fir branches and more decorated things.
But Inge is not the only Frisian in America, and she soon overcomes her Christmas blues.
A clique, they all came from Föhr, all girls. We met once a week, Hotel St. George, downtown Brooklyn. You could go swimming there for little money. Our hair got lighter and lighter from the chlorine. And then we went bowling on 86th Street and had dinner somewhere afterwards. And then we met up with the guys from Föhr on 86th Street.
One of these boys is Hermann Rikmers. The two are now officially a couple.
While Hermann and Inge are enjoying their lives in love in New York, the Nazis occupied Denmark and Norway in the spring of 1940. Shortly thereafter, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and France fall as well. Meanwhile, the Nazi leadership has declared Föhr a restricted area. There are no more tourists. In their place, Wehrmacht soldiers arrive, and the airfield is expanded to accommodate a fighter squadron. Young men of draft age are now rarely seen on the island. Many have been called up for military service. One of them is Johannes Hinrichsen, a boy from Hermann's neighboring village of Borgsum. They have no idea that the two of them will almost meet on the front lines. President Franklin D. Roosevelt is alarmed by the developments in Europe and convinced that the continent could fall under German rule without U.S. support. However, the Americans now would have to rearm because they don't have an army to speak of. In 1939, there are fewer than 200,000 U.S. soldiers. In contrast, there are 4.7 million German armed forces soldiers. By the following year, in 1940, there are nearly 9 million. However, it will take some time before the Americans enter the war. The U.S. president launches the largest armament program of all time. In so doing, the U.S. is finally pulled out of the recession that had begun 10 years earlier with Black Thursday. In August 1941, shortly after the attack on the Soviet Union, Roosevelt and the British Prime Minister Churchill convene in a top-secret meeting on a ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Here they decide on the Atlantic Charter, a declaration of the common principles of their international policy, framed in the, quote, hope of a better future for the world. Another important decision is made at this meeting, to use the Queen Mary for troop transport and to place it under American control.
More and more American soldiers are now coming through New York. Inge and her friends have already heard a number of disturbing stories about the GIs. And now the draftees are even turning up in one of their favorite bars.
And across the street was the Lorelei. We were always there, Omin. But then afterwards, after so many soldiers had been drafted in, so many soldiers had been there too. And then the waiter came to us and said, you know what, girls, you don't belong here. Go across the street. It's dangerous for you here. They're just looking for a girl for the night.
In the Föhre and Amrume Club in New York, people are distracting themselves from the war in a particularly special way these days. Some are celebrating as if they were the end of days.
Yes, and I have to say, we were always in the Amrume Club. We had our own events, and I remember once the Amrumers planned one. Oh, I call it filth. And we were 16, 17 years old. It was disgusting. No, that's not for me. The women were all bathing naked and their breasts were flying around. And there was a friend, a really nice one, who said to me, Inge, we could swap our guys for a few days. I said, are you crazy? What's the point? I'll give him back to you. I said, but I don't like your man. Yeah.
On December 7th, 1941, Japanese bombs fall on Pearl Harbor, the most important U.S. base in the Pacific. The Pacific Fleet is decimated. 337 warplanes are destroyed, and 2,403 Americans lose their lives in the attack. With this, the U.S. declares war on Japan. Shortly thereafter, Germany, which is allied with Japan, declares war on the U.S. Inge, Hermann, and all the other Germans in New York now live in a hostile country.
That sounds so dramatic. Hostile country. But that's how it was back then. Wilhelm, Hermann, and the other people from Föhr are no longer the nice immigrants selling salads and sandwiches in the deli, but are suddenly seen quite differently by their neighbors. And with the attack on Pearl Harbor and the American entry into the war, the long connection between Föhr and New York is cut for the first time. The letter and package traffic is stopped. Johanna, Wilhelm's youngest sister, often told me how difficult this time was for her and the family on Föhr, because they simply had no idea how Wilhelm was doing over in New York. And on the other hand, Inge also has no idea what it looks like on Föhr in these times of war.
Large parts of Europe are now occupied by the Nazis. At the end of 1941, the Wehrmacht is standing before Moscow, less than half a year after the initial attack on the Soviet Union. The US is preparing for war. The armed forces have been expanded to 375,000 soldiers in the summer of 1941, and armament production is in full swing. President Roosevelt remains hesitant, though it is surely clear to him that America could not avoid joining their Western allies in an invasion.
I spoke to Wilhelm about this time and about what it was like for her to live in the US as a German when the war broke out.
Someone said to me once, oh, why don't you say you're Swedish? You look like a big Swede. And I said, why should I say that when I'm German? Not that I'm exactly proud of being a German at these times because we're at war, but I never denied my nationality.
Another story that Wilhelm told me about that time was one that in hindsight she found rather shameful.
And I have to say that we didn't behave well as Germans. It was war. And we were German and German friendly. And we had a basement and we could party there.
Wilhelm speaks of a basement in Manhattan that belonged to a bar owner from Sylt, where she and some other Germans would meet. They would party and sing.
Da bist du gesagt, und wir fahren, und wir fahren, und wir fahren gegen England. Also så starten, eh? Och efter sa det till Östlet kunde jag må umgång,
The song they sang, Wir fahren gegen England, is a song from World War I. The song praises German courage. Afterwards, Inge finds it a bit embarrassing that they were glorifying it back then. I find it strange that Wilhelm and her friends are sitting in a New York basement singing a song like that. Did they mean that seriously, or was it just youthful recklessness? Inge was 17 at that time and spent half of her life in New York. I wonder how she felt, as a German or as an American.
Regardless of your feelings or where you feel you belong, for the Americans, after the German declaration of war, all Germans are now enemies. So-called enemy aliens. And so it is that one evening, Hermann receives an unannounced visit.
Open the door!
And then one night, the FBI came to the deli where he worked during the night and in secret and searched everything. They found a tape from the German Navy. It belonged to his cousin who used to work there. He was arrested. He spent a few days in jail.
The FBI grill Hermann at length. They want to know if he poses a danger, or is perhaps even a spy. But he is only a clerk in the deli. Still, as we have seen, Germans are now under general suspicion. The FBI men offer him two options: cooperate and work for the US military, or face imprisonment. Hermann wrestles with the decision he is facing.
Grandpa Hermann wrote a long letter to his parents about these difficult times. It was in Ulmam's safe with his military file. I found it years after she died. When I read it for the first time, I cried because I finally understood what Grandpa Hermann had been through. As far as I know, he never talked about it with anyone. And then suddenly, I had the answers to most of my questions.
Rego Park, June 26th, 1947. Dear parents, it's Sunday morning and I'll try to write you a quick letter. We are pleased to hear that you are always in good health. We are all well too. Now, dear Father, I will comply with your request and try to describe the matters of war and wounds. In 1939, as you may recall, I was excluded from American military service, so to speak, because I had German citizenship. A year later, when America declared war on Japan and Germany, I had to report again. Then I was already considered and treated as an enemy. I had to fill out another questionnaire. And the last question was whether I was willing to fight against my homeland, which of course I denied. About 3 months later, I was arrested by the secret police and taken to the police station. There I was interrogated for 6 hours. After a few days in prison, I came to the conclusion that I was willing to join the American Army, but on the condition that I would not fight in Europe, which I then signed. On December 31st, 1942, I had to go for a medical examination and was selected for the Army after a thorough medical examination.
Hermann's agreement with the enrollment officers that he will not fight in Europe is of no interest to the US Army. He will fight in Europe. On the other side of the ocean, in Germany now as well, every man is called up for military service. One of them is Johannes Hinrichsen from Borgsum, 6 years younger than Hermann, the young man we met earlier. He later notes,
On December 6, 1942, I received my call-up papers and had to report to the barracks in Ratzeburg. The following day, we were issued military uniforms. 1 week later, we came to Herning in Jutland for training.
Following his training as a gunner, Johannes is ordered with his regiment to the Eastern Front in Ukraine at the beginning of 1943. Like other farmers' sons, he is deployed as the driver of a horse-drawn cart. Across the Atlantic, Hermann begins his training with the U.S. military. He is issued a uniform, boots, and a helmet. And like all GIs, he receives a military watch, a Bulova A11, with a green wristband. Still, neither of them suspects that they will soon be lying in the trenches of Normandy with their weapons at the ready. Johannes for the Germans, Hermann for the USA.
I was sent first to Fort Dix in New Jersey. After 4 days, we were loaded onto a train like cows and ended up in Fort McClellan, Alabama. That's in the very south of America. I was very homesick for New York and There was very little to eat. Thank God I was only there 3 months before I was sent to Fort Meade in Maryland. It's between Baltimore and Washington, D.C., only a 4-hour train ride from New York. I was home to visit Inge about every weekend. I was on leave from there in April '43, and Inge and I became engaged.
Well, that doesn't sound very romantic, because it probably wasn't. Mom told me that in the end she decided that the two should get married. So it wasn't like the man proposes to her parents, which wouldn't have worked out anyway. The family was on Föhr, and it wasn't like kneel down and propose or so. Mom was very pragmatic. She sensed that Hermann would have to go to war, and therefore she wanted to create clear conditions. All the same, she had very fond memories of the engagement.
When we went to get the engagement rings, he said to me, "I want 6 sons." And I thought, screw you.
On November 30th, 1943, the Americans, Soviets, and British meet in Tehran to discuss how to free Europe from the clutches of the Nazis. They agree on a tactical landing in France before the summer of 1944. Dwight D. Eisenhower, a general from Texas, is appointed Supreme Commander. The Germans sense that an invasion is imminent somewhere on the French coast and reinforce their troops there. Johannes from Borgsum also arrives in France with his unit. The U.S. must now build up a powerful army in the shortest possible time. The number of troops needs to be tripled. Hermann is one of the new soldiers, and like many of his fellow soldiers, he is not entirely convinced by what he is about to undertake.
In May, the 16th Division was formed. I was enlisted as a private and automatically became an American citizen. In February 1944, we went on maneuvers again, this time to icy northern Michigan on the Canadian border. Here we were trained as ski and snowshoe soldiers for 6 weeks. We lived in the forest and had to build our own huts. It was bitterly cold. The temperatures were always below 32 Fahrenheit. At one point, it was minus 25 Fahrenheit. It's actually a miracle that we escaped with our bones intact. Then it was back to Camp McCoy in Wisconsin. Most of the troops of the 76th Division that were stationed there were sent on to England. I was happy to be transferred back to Fort Dix in New Jersey. At Fort Dix, I was incorporated into the 80th Division. I tried a couple things to get transferred again, because I knew for certain that we were about to make a big trip overseas, which was the last thing I wanted.
Making a big trip overseas, of course, meant Europe. While Hermann spends one of his last weekends off in New York, some of his comrades already board the Allied warships in southern England. Their destination? Normandy. Operation Overlord is now imminent. General Eisenhower addresses the soldiers.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you.
The Allied arsenal is impressive. All told, 130,000 troops, 4,200 landing craft, and 15 hospital ships carrying 8,000 medics are on standby, along with 54,000 vehicles and more than 1,200 warships.
D-Day has come. Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France.
On June 6, 1944, the Western Allies land at Normandy.
In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine.
Young soldiers from the United States, Great Britain, and Canada storm the beaches. At some spots, they quickly overwhelm the Germans. Elsewhere, they encounter fierce resistance. Thousands of men die or are seriously injured. Hermann is not among them. Not yet.
As Hermann's comrades are fighting on the French Atlantic coast, he is standing at his New York apartment in front of his bathroom mirror, excitedly plucking at the beige tie of his uniform. The day is June 11th, 1944. This particular Sunday is warm with early summer, and the sky is blue. It is Hermann and Inge's big day. The wedding bells from the Lutheran Church of Our Savior ring out. It is 11:30 in the morning. A few wedding photos are quickly taken with the few invited guests.
Ich nehme mein erstes Heft hier, das schöne Bild von mir und meinem Mann, als wir geheiratet haben. Ich wollte nur zeigen, dass ich auch mal jung und schön war.
I'm looking at the wedding pictures right now. Wilhelm is wearing such elegant gloves and a white short-sleeved dress. Hermann is wearing his beige US Army uniform with a white belt. The two of them look overjoyed. The wedding party was really quite small. Inge's maid of honor is her best friend Hilde. Then there was Aunt Martha. Hermann's groomsmen are his three older brothers, John, Joe and Teddy Rickmers. And now Wilhelm is a Rickmers too. Sadly, the couple don't have time for an extended honeymoon. Instead, Hermann has a quite different journey ahead of him. The date of this journey was June 28, 1944, barely 3 weeks after their wedding. I can only imagine what the farewell scene was like. Wilhelm never spoke about it, but from everything else she told me and knowing her, I can imagine the day going something like this.
On this particular morning, as the sun is still hiding behind the skyscrapers of New York, thousands of people bustle around the harbor. There are entire families there. Boys in shorts, girls and women in colorful summer dresses, and men with heavy duffel bags. It is warm early on, and it is supposed to get even hotter. The Queen Mary is moored at Pier 40. She was originally a luxury liner, the fastest and most modern of her time. Room for over 2,000 passengers, accommodated in luxurious cabins. Lounges, bars, pools. There was no lack of entertainment. Or there had been none. Effective immediately, the Queen Mary has a different mission. Today, 15,000 soldiers are going on board. She begins her military service.
The Queen Mary is probably the most important ship of the Second World War. It dutifully serves, bringing hundreds of thousands of American soldiers to Europe. Hitler is well aware of this. He offers the submarine captain who successfully torpedoes the Queen Mary 1 million Reichmarks and the Iron Cross with oak leaves, a special Medal of Honor. But the ship is considered almost impossible to torpedo. Traveling at more than 30 knots, or around 35 miles per hour, it moves too fast to take precise aim. In addition, the Queen sails a constant zigzag course, and the typical Cunard Line colors, black, white, and red, have been painted over since 1940, with light sea gray, making the ship practically invisible, especially at night. The Queen Mary is now also known as the Grey Ghost. And that's just the exterior. Inside, the ship has been turned upside down for its new purpose. Folding cots have been installed wherever possible, even in the pools. They stack up to the ceiling. The kitchen, designed to conjure up haute cuisine, has been enlarged and is now tasked with delivering 45,000 rations a day. Powerful ventilation systems have been installed on board. The approximately 15,000 people on board generate as much heat as a power plant, and without it, would die of heat stroke.
In the midst of the confusion on the quay, flanked by the front of the huge ship, Inge and Hermann stand and hug each other. He is wearing his beige military uniform, with his brown hair neatly trimmed. Inge is wearing a short-sleeved, flowered dress made of light cotton. Her straw-blonde mane is tied back with a hairband. Inge is crying. Hermann tries to calm her, saying that everything will be all right. He wants to convey confidence, but his restless gaze betrays his inner tension. Inge breaks free from his embrace and reaches into her handbag. She hands him an envelope containing photos from their wedding taken 2 weeks ago. The color prints from the store in the Bronx had been ready just in time.
Thick smoke billows from the Queen Mary's 3 smokestacks, darkening the sky. The boilers are under pressure, and the engines are readying for the departure. More and more soldiers are marching on board. John, Joe, and Teddy have also come to say goodbye to their little brother. They have gathered around the 2 newlyweds and lay their hands on Hermann's shoulders. The Queen Mary's muffled horn sounds with a deafeningly loud blare. Everyone knows what this means. All aboard. Time to say goodbye. Perhaps forever. Hermann hugs his brothers once more and gives Inge one last kiss. A last heartfelt embrace. Then he turns, marches off, and disappears into the crowd pushing towards the ship. From this point, he is only a soldier. His number, 32-700-955.
On June 28th came the big day. Our unit went to New York, and that's where the Queen Mary was docked. We were crammed on board like sardines, and the journey began.
And then my husband went overseas to war.
The Queen took my man away, far to another land, where boys are dying in the sand. I am crying. The King says the eyes of the world are upon you and your brothers in arms, but all I really hope, you're not dying. On the radio, I heard the magic show. I let it go. My love will return. On the radio, I heard the magic show, and I let it go. My love will return.
When he left Germany, Grandpa Hermann never would have dreamt that he would have to return to Europe in uniform with a weapon in his hand. I never saw Grandpa look afraid. Quite the opposite. As a child, I always felt completely safe with him. But he was surely scared shitless on his trip into war. There was one thing that frightened him horribly. He once said, "What if I see someone I know on the other side and have to shoot him?"
I felt very bad on board those days. I'm sure you can imagine why. On July 4th, after a smooth voyage, we landed in Glasgow, Scotland. From there, I went by train to Birmingham, England. We were there for 3 weeks. I went to interpreting school there. I liked that very much, because I knew I didn't have to go to the front where all hell was breaking loose.
At the interpreter's school in Birmingham, Hermann learns how to interrogate captured Wehrmacht soldiers and how to do it in such a way that they can keep no secrets. 2 months after the beginning of the invasion, Hermann goes ashore with the 80th Division at Omaha Beach.
On August 4th, we reached the coast of France, the landing point of the invasion.
Only 6 days prior, on the other side of the front, Wehrmacht soldier Johannes Hinrichsen from Föhr is in a dangerous situation 44 miles south of Omaha Beach when his division is surrounded by the Allies. Johannes later writes in his diary,
On July 28, 1944, we were surrounded on 3 sides in a position between Avranches and Coutances and had to drive our guns into position. Ambulances with wounded were returning from the front lines towards us. The Germans were racing to escape this entrapment from the open side, so the streets were full of horses, trucks, tanks, and every manner of vehicle. The horse-drawn vehicles were often overtaken, so we couldn't protect ourselves as quickly as the American planes reached us. They kept the streets clear from above with their machine guns and tracer ammunition. As we scrambled for cover, I tried to take my fellow passengers with me. We sheltered for quite some time under a tree as the tracers pinned us where we were. Our side sustained high casualties, and everyone who stayed with the horses was lost. Soon after, the command came to dismount and rappel and let the horses go. There were about 10 of us left. From that moment on, we were considered missing by our commanders. We wandered around and at one point had to cross a main road that was heavily occupied by the American tanks. Early in the morning of August 1st, 1944, we stopped at a small farm where we got something to eat and catch our breath. Some of the group had even taken off their jackets and boots. Suddenly someone shouted, "The Yanks are coming!" Everyone suddenly became frightened and ran off without their rifles, jackets or boots. One man fell to the ground in front of me and I tripped over him. I heard the lieutenant shouting, "If you are wounded, stay down and let yourselves be taken prisoner." I thought, wounded? I'm not wounded, and got up and kept running. We all quickly lost sight of each other, and I was standing alone in the open.
In his journal, Johannes describes in detail how he fell into the Americans' hands.
I heard an infantry soldier whimpering. I rushed to him and saw that he was wounded. I got my first aid kit and bandaged him up. We were stuck in an awkward position because we could be seen from the street behind the bushes. My colleague said that as a wounded man, he would probably not be taken prisoner alive. Suddenly we saw the American soldiers approaching, 3 of them with their rifles at the ready. I immediately fell to my knees and raised my hands above my head so they could see that I was surrendering. Then I asked God to stand by us. The American soldiers motioned to me and I walked towards their rifles with mixed feelings. They asked me if there were any more comrades there. "Yes," I said. "One comrade is hurt." They beckoned me to get him and I turned my back to the Americans, wondering if they would shoot. The wounded comrade lying in the bushes strung his arms around my neck and we limped into captivity. The prisoners of war were always transported by truck, and as we passed through the villages the French, even the pastors in their robes, stood on the roads, clenched their fists and threw apples and pears at us. We felt inferior and very uncertain about what would happen next. All the while, we were relieved that the war was finally over.
For Johannes Hinrichsen, the war is over, at least as far as combat is concerned. He has not fired a single shot in 16 months of service. And now, he is a prisoner of war in Sainte-Mère-Église, less than 30 miles from the site of the Normandy landings.
How would the two have reacted If they had actually met here, we don't know.
Prisoners of war. Hundreds of Dutch men in October 1942 would not be so lucky. In the village of Putten, there are attacks on the Wehrmacht. The commander then orders Putten to be burned down as a warning to other towns. He takes all 661 men of military age as prisoners of war. Only 49 survive. The Wehrmacht commander, who we previously met in episode 3, is none other than Friedrich Christiansen from Föhr, the pilot of the Doe X seaplane.
Hermann's 80th Division quickly advances and initially fights in northeastern France. Then his division advances towards Lorraine and the German border. In the aforementioned letter, Hermann writes,
From the landing, things progressed very quickly, as our division was integrated into General Patton's Third Army. I was still with the regimental staff, interrogating and processing the German prisoners. But the more we advanced, the more losses we incurred in soldiers and equipment. It was then decided that I would need to go to the front.
It is then that Hermann faces the enemy for the first time. On the other side of the line is the infamous 101st SS Panzer Tank Division with 14 of the imposing Tiger II tanks.
It was sheer horror. I had never been so afraid. With their huge tanks, they fired at us so hard that the earth shook. And where the rounds landed, an area the size of half a soccer field was reduced to nothing.
Day by day, the Allied forces now push eastward. Their goal is to reach the Ruhr area and destroy the factories manufacturing weapons in the region for the Nazis. Hermann is now a squad leader in the 319th Infantry Division. He leads a small group of soldiers who operate on the front line on foot, usually behind a tank, with light weapons. In November, his division arrives on the doorstep of Metz, a strategically important city on the German-French border.
On November 14th, my entire battalion was destroyed in a direct hit. I had just left for the command control to get orders. Lucky timing. From that day forward, I was very nervous and had a bad feeling about what lay in store for me. Eventually, my unlucky day did come. On November 16th, I was seriously wounded in battle. At 10 o'clock in the morning, we were on the attack. As we advanced, a counterattack was launched, and all hell broke loose. The tank I was following was hit, and I was hurled to the ground. In the moment, I didn't even know that I had been hit. I hadn't felt anything. Only as I tried to get up and couldn't, did I realize that I was wounded. I lay wounded for 5 hours before the medics arrived to help. Those 5 hours were indescribable. No need to elaborate. At one point, a soldier approached me, looked me up and down and noticed my wristwatch. He took it and disappeared without helping me. That same evening in the field hospital I was operated on. I came to the next evening. The doc told me where and how badly I was wounded. They gave me a blood transfusion, and from then I began to return to my strength. I had been wounded in 5 places: near my left ear, at my neck, on my back of my neck, under my right arm, and most seriously, in my back. The shot entered my body on the right side of my spine and came out under my right arm. I partially lost 2 ribs, and my lung was damaged.
What my grandpa describes here really hit me. He almost died. Of course, in war something could have happened at any minute, but this passage in his letter really got me thinking. Life can be over in the blink of an eye.
After 10 days in the field hospital, Hermann is taken to Paris, to a real hospital.
I could have stayed there a little longer, because the food was very good and everything was so nice and clean. From there I was flown to England, where I was for 3.5 months. I still had severe pain under my right arm and could hardly write a letter. I was then cut open again, and it turned out that there was still a piece of shrapnel in my body. Once they removed it, I recovered very quickly, and I was allowed, or rather became able to, get up and walk around. Finally, the orders came that I would be transported back to the States. On March 21st, 1945, I returned home to New York.
I can well imagine how overjoyed Ulmam and Grandpa Hermann must have been when they saw each other again. I did the math. They had not seen each other for 264 days and nights. But knowing Ulmam, she firmly believed that everything would be all right. One more thing comes to mind. The shrapnel that they took out from under Hermann's arm in the hospital were given to me years later by Ulmam in a box, along with his medals. "You're so interested in family history," she said. "These are best in your hands." And she was right about it. The splinters are sharp-edged and as big and heavy as a dime. Incidentally, I used it to create a few sounds for the war scene. You won't be able to hear it, but it was important to me to work with it.
This is London calling. Here is a news flash.
On May 1st, the news that Adolf Hitler is dead spreads around the world.
The German radio has just announced that Hitler is dead.
The whole world longs for peace. And then, finally, this day comes. On May 7th, the German armed forces officially and unconditionally surrender.
Signed the act of unconditional surrender of all German land, sea, and air forces in Europe.
That was episode 5. The next one is the last. And that's where a very important person for me comes into play, my mother. But it's not just birth being celebrated. Föhr is getting its own cocktail. But it's not all going to be plain sailing until then. If you have any suggestions or feedback, please check the show notes for my email address. Föhr to New York is a podcast by Honig&Gold in cooperation with the Ferring Foundation. I am Bente Faust. Production Honig&Gold. Idea, book and direction Daniel Hauptmann and me, Bente Faust. Music and sound design Boy Cassidy. Project management Ferring Foundation Robert Klei. Research Daniel Hauptmann, Bente Faust and Kreske Ingwersen. Fact-checking Yves Müller and Ute Maack. Cover illustration Jana Alu. Recorded at Off Your Tree Studio in Hamburg. Speakers Morgan Finlay, Valerie von Hornbach, Jeremiah Costello and Daniel Hauptmann. Translation Inke Rittmers and Morgan Finlay. By the way, you can find the podcast also in a German and a Ferring version.